Welcome, guys. It's that time again. It's the Friday where we have our experts. Our topic today is very interesting, the one that we're going to cover, which is we'll be focusing on men's mental health. So men's mental health. So joining us today, I'm just going to give a bit of a background of our guest. I'm starting off with our journalist, author, and media consultant, Marion Shaw. She's an award-winning journalist, author, and media consultant who has been writing about mental health for more than 30 years. In 2005, she received a Rosalind Carter Mental Health Journalism Fellowship from the Carter Center in Atlanta, which enabled her to write Surfacing People Coping with Depression and Mental Illness. She's also the author of Big Bully, An Epidemic Unkindness, and has ghostwritten numerous books for a wide range of clients. Her latest book, Men and Mental Health, Shattering the Silence, which was released in 2025 last year, has recently been chosen as a finalist for the Sunday Times Literary Awards. As a media consultant to SADC, Marion is honored to have played a role in reaching out through the South African media to help realize Rosalind Carter's vision of breaking stigma surrounding mental health. Welcome, Marion.
Thank you very much.
And again, our second speaker is Professor Solly Rataimani, psychiatrist and chairperson of the Ministry Advisory Committee on Mental Health. A bit of background on Professor Solly. Is a retired psychiatrist and a former head of Department of Psychiatry at the University of Free State and Sefako Makhado Health Sciences. He is a member of the Colleges of Medicine of South Africa, for short CMSA, and has served leadership roles within the Health Professions Council of South Africa. He's actively involved in several mental health organizations and currently serves as a chairperson of the South Africa's Ministerial Advisory Committee on Mental Health. Prof. Rataimani is also the former deputy chairperson and chairperson of the Central Drug Authority of South Africa and has made significant contributions to mental health policy, education, and advocacy throughout his career. Welcome, Prof.
Thank you very much.
So today's topic is very interesting. It's going to be focusing on men's mental health. So we're just going to be having a conversation. If I can just start off with you, I believe, Marion Share, congratulations in order for your book being one of the finalists. If I can come to you, Marion, since the book was published, you've spent the past year speaking at events, conferences, corporate, and even in the media. What conversations have emerged that you didn't expect? What have men, families, or communities been saying to you that perhaps wasn't being said before?
Well, you say, what do men say? It's quite interesting because a lot of women had a lot to say too. I remember a couple of days before the book came out, a friend of mine I've known for a long time, she said to me, when is your book coming out? And I said, Thursday or whatever it was. And she said, I'm so excited because I want to buy that book for my husband because this is what he's going through, but he won't admit it or he doesn't see it. And she wants to give him the book to read. Otherwise, yeah, pretty much that, that people who were affected themselves, yes, they're more likely to go and buy a book and read about it than go, of course, to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And I think that's the thing, the whole theme that I got out of doing this book was, as South African men, doesn't matter what color you are, you're taught, be tough. Cowboys don't cry, just keep it to yourself. And that was what I wanted to shatter, that silence. And the feedback I got, I think we've been partially successful. This book has done extremely well. So all I can say is someone's buying it.
Yeah. True, which is quite interesting when you mentioned the point that even ladies are buying it or women are buying it for their partners. Just to bring me, Professor, while you touched on men don't cry, we often hear these phrases a lot in our communities. Indo Taikali, cowboys don't cry, like Marion has mentioned. How do these messages influence the way men deal with emotional challenges mental health and seeking help?
Well, this is a cultural, socio-cultural issue. It depends on one's upbringing. It depends on the family they grew up in. There are families that allow men to actually talk and cry. But in most families, like the family that I was up in, they will listen to you, but they want you to do something yourself, fight back if it means fighting back, against your friends in the street and so on, but don't bring it home unless it's serious. What it does really for older men, even teenagers and so on, is that they tend to bottle up whatever hurts them, whatever worries them. And unfortunately, it might take a little trigger, not related to the original problem, that may bring out an irrational response to a situation that may not need that kind of response. Let me give you an example. You greet somebody and you compliment him on what kind of jacket or shirt he's wearing and so on, but he assumes that you are ridiculing him. And then he may just lash out or just respond, with anger. That moment does not warrant that kind of anger. But that outburst tells you that there's something inside that this person has not dealt with that needs to be dealt with. And that means if we're talking to men, we have to have a telescopic view of their life, where they come from, what sort of experiences they've had in life, and how they've dealt with those, things that are hurtful, things that were difficult. So in short, men don't cry. It's really a fallacy. It's not something that we should encourage. We should be encouraging men to come out and talk freely about what hurts them. But there must be a context for that, which we will talk about as we go on.
An interesting point that you raise in that, one would find, situations when one gets angry for no apparent reason, and
Yes.
being told that you should be man up and be strong. So from what you are saying, what I'm picking up is that you're saying men were not taught how to deal with or regulate their emotions. But bringing into our conversation, Marion, one of the powerful aspects of your book is that it shares real South African men's stories. Have you seen the book being used as a tool to start difficult conversations around mental health, whether in families, workplaces, schools, or communities? Can you share maybe any examples that particularly stayed with you?
Sorry, Jaboka, your sound is a little bit quiet. I didn't get the question. I'm sorry. Could you
Okay,
come nearer to your
do that?
mic?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was just saying that having had Prof mentioned, that there's some of the symptoms that we see in men that they're unable to deal with or regulate their emotions. So one of the powerful aspects of your book is that it shares real South African men's stories. Have you seen the book being used as a tool to start difficult conversations around mental health, whether in families, workplaces, schools, or communities? And do you have any examples that have particularly stayed with you?
Yes, absolutely. It all boils down to stigma. The word stigma, everything I've ever written really over the last 31 years on mental health comes back to stigma. So let's say whether it's a family and especially in the workplace, men in the workplace feel, and women, of course, if their colleagues know that they suffer from mental health, if they know they're on antidepressants or seeing a therapist, they're going to, think less of them as a person, but that they can't do their job properly. And so it's that stigma. And very often also, of course, they don't want the bosses to know because they won't get promoted. In families, what I have heard many times is that, they maybe the wife knows, but don't tell so-and-so because, I've also had an instance where a lady who was a doctor, she was in my first book, and she's a doctor herself, and she had a breakdown. She was admitted to a clinic, and her mother, they're panicking, saying, "We've told everybody that you've done something medical. We mustn't tell them that you're in here because it's mental health." So it all goes back to stigma, and only by talking about it, I think we're going to break the stigma. And of course, as journalists, that's why myself and SADAG often do conferences for journalists just to encourage them and teach them about writing on mental health. We just need to spread the word.
Interesting. And like you say, the stigma, it's very huge. And I think with the book, it's shattering those silences. Hence, I love the title. But as I can bring you, Prof, in, having heard what Maren has outlined, what role do fathers and male role models play in shaping how boys learn to deal with emotions, challenges, and vulnerability?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was actually at the Kingsmead Book Fair Saturday week ago, and the chaps on with me, we were on a panel, and it was very much about the manosphere, growing up in South Africa and the influence of your father. And I think, yeah, I mean, everyone's father has a different attitude, but what with my book Bullying as well, of course, if someone grows up to be a bully, you very often find they come from a home where that was the norm. And it's the same with mental health. That if a father says, suck it up, again, boys don't cry, whatever, be a man, it stops, I think it stops someone thinking, well, I can be vulnerable, and it's really learning that mental health is a real thing. And I don't think it's just the families. I think schools must shoulder some responsibility there too. And I know, for instance, as you know, SADAG goes into schools and does school talks. We need more of that.
And what also have you observed as well, bringing into the conversation, Prof? What have you observed in terms of what we are unpacking now about the role of fathers and male role models shaping how boys learn to deal with emotions?
Well, as I say,
Firstly, I think.
oh, sorry,
Yeah,
you were asking.
yes,
I didn't
Brendan,
realize.
yes,
Sorry.
no worries.
Yeah. Firstly, I think we should distinguish between the family structures. There are families where there's only the mother, there's no father. So there is no appropriate modeling. But then there are families where both parents are there. Now, interestingly, you would think that male children will talk more to their fathers. But you find that generally, both male and female children talk more to their mothers. And their mothers are more receptive because they know if they go to their father, he'll say, be strong, don't cry, do something about it. So that is a part of upbringing. And I think just to give you a clinical example, recently I was asked by a friend to find the family a therapist. Firstly, he wanted me to be the therapist, the counselor for the family. And I said, no, I'm your friend and I'm too close to you. I don't think your wife and children will be very receptive to my intervention. I can refer you. Then I found the counselors, and then he says, but you know what? He calls me back, says, I don't think I need therapy. I think they need therapy. Now, I'm bringing another concept of ownership of the problem. Here is a person who can't sleep, who worries about his wife and children, in fact, their daughters. But he doesn't see that as a problem for him. He thinks if they solve their problem, the family problem will be solved. But they see him as a problem. But they're afraid to tell him that we think you are the problem. I don't know whether I understand what I'm saying. What I normally say to families is own the problem collectively. It's not the man's problem or the mother's problem or the children's problem. It's a family problem. So if you're seeking help not for yourself or for the child, but you're seeking help for the family. If the therapist says, please come, all of you, for a session, that doesn't mean you have a problem. But piggybacking on what Maren said, it's an issue of stigma. There's a high-profile person who does not want to see himself walking into a therapist's room. He doesn't want people to know that he consulted because they'll assume that he has a serious mental problem. But how else can you solve this? Because the therapist or counselor would want to ask all of you questions about the origin of the problem and lead you to strategies of how to resolve it. So it's a stepwise issue. And this ownership of the problem is key. If the family does not collectively own the problem, then it's not easy to resolve it. But for individual men, they have to be encouraged, one or the other, to talk to their friends openly about things that they're worried about, that they're concerned about, because friends will notice a few things, that this person has changed. He used to be organized. He used to be punctual. He used to give us ideas about new things to do. Suddenly, he has changed. He comes late to work. He's no longer organized. He delays the process. And there are so many outbursts in meetings or in settings where there's no need for the outburst. So there's that aggression that comes out in subtle ways. And sometimes it can be physical also for no reason. So the man himself must also accept that the problem is his. Is there a way that he can get help? Now, I find that the work that Sadak is doing is very helpful, because reaching out to men helps them understand that, talking to your priest, your counselor, your therapist, or a friend or an uncle or your granny and so on, does not mean you have a problem. But you have issues that you don't want to keep inside, because if you keep those issues, many of them inside, and you don't talk about them openly and they worry you, they will come out in a form of an outburst. Give you a last example. When we look at road rage in South Africa and anywhere in the world, it's mainly men who are violent, heavy, fast drivers. They get in and out of lanes and they shout and insult. Well, a few women do that too, but it's mainly men. What is that? Is this about the driving on the road? Is this somebody who's harboring something that he has not dealt with? But he has not owned up to the fact that he has problems. He might be driving a beautiful car and so on, but he's behaving in an irregular manner, because roads are busy, they're there for everyone. Why should he be insulting? Why does he want to be the first one, to reach a destination? So there are those steps that you have to consider. But key to this is ownership of the problem, either as a man or as a family, collectively.
Sure. No, I'm actually learning a lot. Funny enough, this afternoon, I just saw a quote where it says, even strength must bow down to wisdom sometimes,
Yes.
So what I'm picking up, what I'm taking from our conversation is it's a collective effort, and stigma keeps coming up. Stigma keeps coming up. If I can go through to Mariam, after hearing from hundreds of people through your book tours, interviews, and engagements, what has surprised you most about men's willingness or reluctance to talk about their mental health today? And has anything challenged your own assumptions about men and emotional vulnerability?
What surprised me? I think two things. One was some of the people I interviewed who are well known, and I'm talking about the rugby coach, Swayze de Bruin. When you look at him, that's the epitome of a South African rugby player, strong, tough man. And he didn't break down when things went wrong. He broke down through pressure. He was in Australia and New Zealand, very successful test for the Springboks. They won all their tests. And whether it was just that pressure itself, and finally it had been coming for a while. But of course, he couldn't do anything about it, because he said to me, in that rugby world, that's something you just don't do in South Africa. And I was surprised, someone like him. And I think an even bigger surprise was Chad le Clos, the famous swimmer, that looking at him, here's a guy, I think the public was surprised. There's a guy that's successful, top of his career, very good looking young man, seems to have the world at his feet, yet he was this close to taking his own life. So that tells you a lot. He phoned his parents and they put him on a plane back to South Africa. He was in Germany. And of course, only so many of the stories I've heard over and over again, what a relief it was when they get booked into a clinic and they are diagnosed with clinical depression or anxiety, stress, panic disorder. Once they're diagnosed, that didn't surprise me. I mean, I've heard this many times. And really, I think surprise that, I don't know if it's surprise. I think what's encouraging is that more men are now prepared to do something about it. I have a son who's 38, and he, as far as I know, never had any real issues. But he said to me, he goes to therapy because he finds it really helpful. That weekly or monthly appointment where he can just talk and tell somebody his problems. And he said it is the best thing he's ever done. And I think that I was quite surprised that he told me this. And I think a lot of his friends of his age are doing it, which is very, very encouraging.
True, true. I think also from what you're saying is it's also we need to look at therapy in a different context, you know, in terms
Absolutely.
of it's also a space where because you'd hear people saying, well, I don't have depression, I don't have money, but if I had money, my depression would go away. But you know, not looking to the fact that even if you've got money, you might get excited, not know what to do with that money, but you need to go for therapy to talk about those emotions. So finding a healthier way of understanding why one goes for therapy breaks that stigma. So I'm going to take a couple of questions from our viewers, which is I'm going to ask you, Marion. Start with you, Marion. There's a viewer saying that I feel like many men have been overlooked from a young age. Men are often expected to be tough, provide for others, and cope with challenges on their own. So many were raised in difficult circumstances and may not have been positive male, may not have had, excuse me, had positive male role models to guide them. This can affect confidence, relationships, fatherhood, and how men see themselves. How do we begin to address these pressures, and how can we men seek support without feeling judged, weak, or inadequate?
Well, I think I'd like to pass that to Solly because
Okay.
I'm not a man, and
Yeah.
and I
Well,
think he
being a
could
man,
answer that way better.
being a man, I might also be a culprit, you know. But
Yeah.
the fact is that men who have been brought up, as you've been brought up, to take to take charge, to defend themselves, to do things, protect women, and so on, tend to over control. In relationships, they want to be controlling. If things don't go their way, they get upset. And that might lead to some of the things we see symptomatically gender-based violence. What causes gender-based violence within families? Example I can give is that if a man loses his job and then the wife suddenly is the breadwinner or earns more, or they're both working, but the wife earns more, he doesn't feel comfortable about it. Instead of them sitting down together to say, well, this is a situation, we can support each other in this manner and that manner, he just feels undermined. But the undermining factor, and this is a typical clinical setting I've been involved in. Wonderful man, good job, but the wife gets a better job. But the job also entails that she has to travel, and she sometimes has to come back home late. He starts building all sorts of imaginations that she could be doing A, B, and C, but he does not sit down and say to her, I think your job is taking you away from the family. Is there a way you can tailor the hours of work and also reduce the traveling? But then he goes to talk to other people. Now, here is the issue. These are stable men who suddenly starts over drinking, starts smoking too much, and starts being argumentative in very simple situations where a normal discussion that people could laugh about would do, but he lashes out at people and so on. And then later he realized that, but there's something wrong here. Now, at the point the men realize that there's something wrong, this is not me. I'm not always like this. That's when he needs to go and talk to someone, a counselor, therapist, if he wants to, a priest, or a family friend, or some of the relatives that I am concerned about A, B, and C. How can I deal with it because it bothers me? Now, that first step of seeking help is very crucial. So I realize now in South Africa, we're having more and more forums where men are invited to discuss the issues. It's not just in Men's Mental Health Month. It happens throughout the year in different settings. And there are more books now being written about this. So I think if we can help men understand that they are not different from women or any other human being, that they are also prone to get depressed or anxious. Unfortunately, a man will not say, I'm depressed, I'm feeling low. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. But then he'll drink too much. He will speed on the roads. He will start insulting people unnecessarily or being too argumentative. Those are symptomatic issues. And that's a point when in therapy, you say, but this trigger of the particular feeling you have now or the response you've displayed doesn't seem to be a major issue. Let us talk about your life history. You may find that he's got a life even before marriage where he experienced certain things that were never resolved. And he didn't deal with them, because if you have dealt with them, they will never affect you in later life. So the therapist would then have to encourage him to seek help and give him strategies of going back in time and see how he dealt with issues, or bring them up so that the therapist could say, this is how the current situation relates to those situations, and then give him strategies that he can use on his own or with family to move forward in life. Because you get stuck, you're not moving forward because you think nothing can help you. And that's an element of stigma. How do you break that stigma? How do you encourage men to seek help? I think that is key.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of wisdom from the both of you, seeing, and I hope the viewers as well, they're learning a lot. And it's true to say that as men, when we go to the GP, we only present physical symptoms like back pain, headache. It's not easy for us to say, look, I think I'm stressed, or I might be having depression. But Marian, being in the space of being a media consultant and writing so many incredible books, do you think things have changed? Are we winning this battle?
Yes, I definitely think so. I remember I've told this story quite a few times that if I go back 20 odd years ago, I was one of the journalists that helped start Men's Health magazine. And it was a great success. And I went to the editor, who was a guy then in his 40s. And I said to him, could we do a piece about men and depression? His words to me were, in fact, where are we now? 2026. Yeah, about 20, maybe 25 years ago. His words to me were, no, we can't do that. It'll make our readers depressed. Go on, many years later, when I did get the Carter Fellowship, two different editors. I walked into their office, sat down with them and said, I would like to do 3 special reports, bigger than a feature. I mean, 3 huge stories on different aspects of men and mental health. And they said yes straight away. And you know what I picked up? That they, whether it was themselves or someone in their family, they understood mental health and they understood the importance of getting the word out. And we did. And the one story we did, which was called When Is It More Than Just a Bad Day? SADAG's phones ran off the hook for 3 weeks. I had to bring extra counsellors in because this was one of the first time men saw this and had an opportunity. Since then, what you asked, well, since then, it's got so much better. I mean, it's really dramatically changed. It's still got a long way to go. But yes, I do think men now are talking about it. SADAG have started support groups for anyone listening. There are support groups just for men. So I can't encourage you enough to get hold of SADAG.
Sure.
Just to add to that, Marion.
Sure.
The most difficult issue is to actually encourage the men to seek help, because you see, sometimes he does not realize that he has problems. He noticed that he has changed, but he does not know why. The helpful way would be those around him who notice this change should also be able to say, we noticed A, B, and C, and we don't know you this way. We're not sure what is going on. Maybe we should talk to somebody. You don't label him. You don't say you could be depressed or you could be anxious, because that's not your forte. You're not a therapist. You say, but can we consult someone as a family? Can you go and talk to someone so that he doesn't feel isolated as a problem? But this now is taken as a collective family issue. I think that's important. But these points that I'm raising lead to what I call the telescopic view of his life. You've got to look at points of change. High achiever, passes well at high school, does well at university, and then gets a good job, he gets appointed to top positions, but suddenly he loses interest and he behaves awkwardly. Those who are close to him realize the change. They cannot confront him and say, but you must be experiencing burnout or depression. They say, but we're not sure what's going on. Let us go and talk to someone, maybe a priest, or maybe let's consult a psychologist, psychiatrist, or a counselor. Go to SADAG or an equivalent organization and so on and seek help. I don't know whether that picture is clear, because it's not about the here and now only. It's about the past, impacting on your future.
Definitely, definitely. And, I'm also looking into our conversation. I think we can go for 2 hours, but this has been very insightful, even for me, as growing up in this community, being at SADC. But in the context, the lessons that I'm picking from this conversation is we need to break the stigma, and it's collaborative effort. It's not just men, women, but it's how as a community do we build each other and support each other in terms of our mental health. But from the both of you guys, I want to thank you for giving us this time. Do you have any parting words from each of you in terms of what would you like to say to anyone out there who's male coming up, even female, struggling with mental health, having a loved one, having a partner? What would be your parting words to them? I will start off with Marian, and then I'll head off to Prof. Solomon.
Thank you. From my side, I would say, don't be frightened to start conversations. Speak to your friends. I know it's hard. South African men don't speak to their friends about these things. Speak to a family member. Speak to someone. Even better, phone SADAG, because it's anonymous. You don't know the person at the other end of the phone. They don't even have to know your name. But by speaking to someone, you take that first step. That would be my advice.
First step. You always start with the first step.
Yes, I think I agree with Marion there, but I also think that we should advise men to belong somewhere. A sense of belonging is very important. You're a church goer, a church member, don't stop going to church. You love soccer, don't stop, that involvement. You've got friends that you normally meet with over weekends and so on. You find one or two that you can trust, that you can share your pain with, and then be open to advice from them. They may not have the answers, but they may lead you to seeking help. I think that's the crucial step, but also involve family and those who are very close to you. That will help.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm sitting in silence. If I would add anything more, I would be ruining what you guys have summed up. I just want to thank you for joining us today. And with that being said, if you need any additional support and would like any more information about the resources SADC offers, including free support groups that Marion has mentioned and other programs, please feel free to go to our website, which is www.sadc.org. This session has been recorded and you can watch it again on our YouTube channel. Please be sure to follow our social media platforms for more articles, updates, and helpful information. From my end, I want to thank the both of you guys. You have given me so much wisdom. And thank you so much for awarding us this time. It's really a blessing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Teboho.
Thanks, Teboho.